Hi, everyone, and welcome to week number five. The learning outcomes this week discuss various ethical decision making models, EDMs, and interrogate the strengths and weaknesses of various models. Again, ethical decision making models. As always, I encourage you to read the unit notes for the week. It talks about ethical decision making based on the development of various models, all of which have strengths and weaknesses. So no one model works all the time. See DQ1, you're going to talk about that a little bit more. Beyond the models identified in this week's readings, it's important to recognize as a leader, you might or develop your own personal and drawing model from a number of ethical paradigms that fit within your sense of self, leadership, philosophy, and moral agency. So we as human beings, put a number of pieces together to find a model that works for us. And I would argue on top of your own personality and how a model works, what's really important is the context as well, in terms of who you're serving through your leadership. And so the model shouldn't just be based on your own preferences, but obviously also very much so on the needs of the people you're serving as a leader. And it actually, one of the articles goes back to Unit 2. We're reminded that in addition to the local, provincial, and national context, there's a global context, and of course there's a quote there from Gardner and Tenuto when you get into the unit notes. So the DQs are as follows. DQ1 states, using connections across the readings and drawing from your own experience and examples, why is it important to consider multiple ethical frameworks when selecting an ethical decision-making strategy? So back to that idea that it's probably not just a one-size-fits-all approach. For example, in the Azar et al. Article, they talk about ethical dimensions and social justice values are of particular concern for minority group members who might experience social exclusion. So if you choose one ethical decision-making model that you're comfortable with, it doesn't necessarily mean everybody else is. So as you think about that question, part of just being inclusive in general has to be around how you choose what model works in what situations. So that speaks to the question of why it's important to consider multiple models versus or pieces of multiple models, rather than just choosing one that you prefer. So think about context there too, and again, the people you're serving. DQ2 talks about the Azar et al. Article, reminds us of the importance of recognizing the impact of history, religion, and cultural context on the ethical decision-making process. How can ethical decision-making frameworks help guide decision-making for educational leaders who have been placed in a community in which the dominant ethno-cultural linguistic background is largely different from their own? So again, we get back to this idea of context and how important it is. And when I consider that question in DQ2, I'm brought back to a quote by Gardner and Tenuto, one of the readings from this week, where they say, leaders must seek to understand groups in society, not as the unitary narrative presented by the dominant culture. And again, we're probably operating from our own dominant culture, but through other critical perspectives, acknowledging racism that can occur in organizations so that moving forward in a new way is possible. So basically, how do we, DQ2 is about how do we challenge ourselves not to choose what resonates most with us from our own background, but again, to choose an ethical decision-making model that's consistent and supports the people we serve as leaders. So just a little bit of background on both the DQs. Of course, thank you for sending in your week 4 assignments, and you'll have them back this week for sure. So I look forward to seeing you in the DQs, and have a great week 5, everyone. Thanks.